Hi, this is Dr. Howard Zucker, the doc in Docology. As both a pediatrician and a father of two young children, I am constantly thinking about the challenges facing our youth today and how we can help them grow up healthy in every sense of the word, intellectually, physically, and emotionally. Children today are navigating an extremely complex world. From an early age, they're exposed to social media pressures, which are unbelievable, academic demands, bullying, and a visible landscape of illicit substances. And at the same time, the rates of anxiety, ADHD, depression, and other behavioral health problems continue to rise. And layered on top of all of this is the issue of a national obesity epidemic and also controversial health statements that are coming out of Washington. These issues don't exist in isolation. They shape how our children see themselves, they shape how they see their place in the world, and we're all seeing it, parents, pediatricians, teachers. In fact, everyone is seeing it. So who better to help us understand these challenges and how to address them than our guest today, Dr. Susan Kressly. Dr. Kressly is the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics and has spent more than 30 years focused on improving the lives of children. And the AAP mission is bold and it is essential to ensure the optimal health and well-being of every child. And probably one of the most important responsibilities in society is to make sure the next generation grows up well, healthy in all ways. Dr. Kressly, welcome, and thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you, and I know you're incredibly busy and all the things that have happened this year that you've dealt with. But I thought maybe we could start with the big picture. Like, from your vantage point, what's happening with children today with all these issues of rising levels of anxiety and stress and concerns? What's happening, and how do we address some of that? Big question, I know.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. This is important. I'd like to start by framing this in who are the kids? Because we really need to understand who the children are before we talk about what they're facing and how we can help them. First of all, kids are a declining number of the population. So in 1960, when I was born, yes, I'm that old, kids made up 36% of the population, about a little more than a third. It is now down to 22% of the population. And so we have a declining child population, and that population is not as healthy as we need them to be, because while kids are 22% of the population, they're 100% of the future. And if you want to look at the economic strength of our country, of every community, no matter what your economic underpinning is, it depends on a healthy workforce. And so I'm so excited that you had me on here, because the first order of business is to pay attention to why child health matters. It is all of our collective futures. And those of us who are now old enough to depend on Social Security and Medicare depend on a healthy workforce. So we used to have a pyramid of a bunch of healthy young people feeding into an aging population. It is now a trapezoid, and we're about to become an inverted triangle in which fewer and fewer young people who are not as healthy as they can be need to support a growing aging population. So I don't care how old you are or what your demographic is or where you live or how you vote. This is everyone's collective problem to pay attention to what we need to do to make children healthier.
I've never heard that kind of way of looking at it with the pyramid. That's so true. I mean, and it's in every area. It's going to be in healthcare. It's going to be in who's teaching our kids. The next generation is all of it, and they're coming up, and we see it in medicine, but it's everywhere. And so if we don't have a healthy crowd, we're going to have a problem. I mean, social issues, there are cultural issues, right? There are environmental. There are so many issues there that are before us. And parents, I feel, often see some of the changes, the crises that kids experience, and or before it even happens, and they're not always sure what's normal. So you've promoted positive parenting during the past year as part of being the president of the AAP. What are some of the signs that a child or an adolescent may be struggling emotionally that parents should be thinking about, and how to tackle that?
Yeah, so I want to frame that in the context of early relational health. We can't scale ourselves out of the mental health emergency and the crisis that is children and adolescents and growing into adulthood. And so how do we support every family to have their child be as healthy and resilient as possible. And so I want your listeners who have young children or grandchildren or even our neighbors, it is lifting up and creating a safe, stable, nurturing environment and relationships for children that really mitigate the stressors that are more difficult and challenging to make. So simple things like reading to your child back and forth instead of handing them technology or sticking them in front of an iPad or the TV. Sit and read. If you can't because you're busy cooking, sing with them. Sing with them. Make up funny stories. So play in a toddler whose brain is incredibly pliable and their imaginations run wild, start making up stories. I once saw a cucumber named Kevin. What do you think he thought about? I mean, crazy little ways, but language and engagement in stimulating their brain in interaction, and something we call serve and return for you tennis players and pickleball players. Oh. It is, a kid says, gaga goo goo, and you say, oh, that's interesting. Are you looking at the light? Wow, that's bright. Having that back and forth interaction. And when you can, looking at the child face to face, they are taking in cues all the time. What parents and grandparents and community members need to know, and daycare workers and teachers, you're literally making brain connections and connecting neurons to each other, and you are contributing to making that child's brain grow. Think about the power of human interaction, and then take that out of the young child space and bring it to your child who's coming home from school after a day, and you're in the kitchen or you're running to get out the door. Stop, sit down, and be mindfully present and have a conversation, or at least give that child a chance to express what they're thinking, what they're feeling. It's an emotionally and physically and mentally exhausting day to go to school. And then you come home and somebody wants to ignore you, don't have a place to process that. Give kids of all ages a re-entry place to process what's been happening. It is why family meals are so important. It is why, and sometimes as you head into the teenage years, I'm a mom, so I like to fix things, and a grandmom. Teenagers sometimes just want a safe place to process it. I learned this really early on with my stepdaughters, who as teenagers came home with, like, you wouldn't believe, and I went into Susie problem solving mode, and they looked at me. I'm like, you don't really want my opinion, do you? And they didn't. They wanted a place to safely process. And so think about what happens in therapy. And there are lots of our kids who need to be connected to therapists and specialists to help process some of the anxiety, depression, and the fears that of what's happening in their world that they're trying to process. But you, as a caring member of the family or the child's safe, stable, nurturing community, can begin that process by giving them a non-judgmental, safe place to process what's happening to them and to lift them up and to validate them. What do we do in counseling? We validate them. That sounds really hard. Yeah, it was hard. Just that, in being present and giving them safe places to express what they're thinking and feeling without judging them or rushing them or ignoring them because you're scrolling on your own phone is such a powerful tool that every single person who's listening to this can start to utilize this afternoon.
I will tell you, with my own kids, they have said to me, Daddy, you're looking at the phone. So they know, they recognize it. And I realize that because we all have such fast-paced schedules and the stresses and the managing work and the overwhelmed nature of things. And it used to be where there was no cell phone. So the day ended. Even if you were, like, as a doctor on call, the day sort of still ended to a certain extent. Now the day seems to never end. And they do want you to give them some attention. And I find it with my kids. One day I said to one of my kids, well, every day I say, what did you learn in school today? But one day one of them said to me, I learned that my teacher doesn't know everything. And I was just like, whoa. And I looked at, and then he like turned back to me and said, and I don't think you know everything, Daddy, either, but that's okay. And it was their brains really pick up things. It's quite amazing. So what are some realistic strategies? If you mention this and you say that we need to figure out how to do this, you mentioned some things. How else can society help support kids? So we have parents, but then we have the teachers, then we have pediatricians, and then we have just people in society that kids interact with every day. What could they do to help them grow up well?
I'd start with being mindfully present when they're in front of you, right? Just because kids are shorter doesn't mean we should overlook them, right? We literally, and pediatricians know this. I mean, I've examined multiple children sitting under the exam table in my office, because if they're scared and then they won't come, we have to meet kids where they are. We can't expect them to enter our adult world. And in fact, our expectations of them having really high level ability to executive functioning and manage their day, we're asking them to leave childhood when they're still trying to develop some tools in their toolbox to how to do that. So first thing is, don't expect kids to come to you. Meet them where they are. And that means if you're walking down the street and you see a kid who's eating an ice cream cone, interact with them and say, "Oh, that looks yummy. What's your favorite flavor?" "Mine's mint chocolate chip." And kids will start to see adults as humans who care about them, who cared enough to take the time to interact. So it's individual, it's collective. We have to start setting some community boundaries. And that can start in your phone, in your house. Maybe everybody's cell phone goes in a bucket in the laundry room. The first hour everybody's home, or the hour around dinner, and at night, don't take your screens to bed. But we have to model that behavior as parents if we expect our kids to do it. You can't be streaming something on your phone and expect your teenager to go to bed without theirs. That is not fair. That is not a level playing field. And kids have a very, very strong sense of justice and fairness, and they will call us on it all the time. And so there are clearly schools and school districts who are eliminating school phones in school. Now, we have another problem with that, because it's making parents anxious. With all of the school shootings and terrible things happening in our world, they don't want to be disconnected from their children. Well, that's not the kids' problem. That's our problem as society leaders and policymakers. So we need to do better about addressing policy. We need to do better about addressing policy that gets rid of the algorithms that are causing addiction. It is literally, we're learning more, and the AAP has a center on youth mental health and social media, which is open. Anybody, any person, teen, parent, kid can ask the experts a question, and they will look through the literature and the research to see what is supported. And so it is a place, and we know that it is more of the addictive algorithm scrollings that is the same sort of addictive behavior, whether it is video games or gambling or substance abuse. It hits that center of our brain that keeps wanting more. They are using it intentionally to keep us on the phones longer and scrolling more on social media and in a mindless way that crowds out other healthy things. So not only do we need to put guardrails around what the tech companies are doing, especially for the kid population, but we also have to look at the things that are being crowded out by screen behavior and purposefully, mindfully engage them. So one of the things my grandkids get mad at me is, like, if you go swimming, you can't take your screens with you. So I'm fortunate enough to live near the beach. So we're going to the beach and we're getting in the water. We're not sitting on our beach chairs looking at our screens. We are in the water and walking up the beach looking for shells and creatures, right? So find ways that disconnect and make you disconnect from where you are. so that you can enjoy nature, be physically active, appreciate the world around you. We know that physical activity, being in nature, all of those things actually are very positive for child's mental and physical health. And so how do we make that happen in a way that is part of their daily life, so it doesn't feel like somebody's stealing me away from my screen, but how cool am I and I want to interact? And if you think about kids' attention, I mean, think about scrolling. If they made it boring, kids would put their screens down. That just like everything else, they get bored within 6 minutes. Ask a second grade teacher who has to continually figure out how to keep engaged. We have the ability to change the way that we use technology and make room for the rest of the things that we know are positive in kids' lives.
You have covered so many issues there. Let me see if I can unpack them. From the mint chocolate chip ice cream, we'll get to the food in a second. But staying on the technology issue, many parents feel these screens are running their households. And I read the book by Jonathan Haidt about the anxious generation, which really put a spotlight on the profound developmental impact of smartphones and social media. Truly an amazing and in many ways scary book. So how do you think that technology and the constant connectivity can be, how could we have a healthier relationship with technology for kids and for parents? Because it's there, and I see it with my kids. They have like Chromebooks and the schools are using them. So how do we keep a healthy relationship with it? And then how do we get parents to handle the struggles that they're going to face when they say phone away or devices away? So that's second. And since you had a lot, I'll add the third question as part of that, which is also children also sometimes will feel ridiculed in school if they don't have the latest device. So what do we do to help them on that?
Yeah, so some of it is just constructing this in with boundaries, right? You and I know as pediatricians, kids from an early age feel secure if we put boundaries in place that are consistent. They know what to expect. They will absolutely push the envelope because that's their job as kids. No, bedtime is at 8 p.m. Here's your 30-minute warning. Here's your 10-minute warning. Up the wooden hill we go, my father used to say, right? Right. So those consistent limits and boundaries are not mean. They are helpful and essential to reducing anxiety, because then kids know what to expect from the world around them. So we need to do it for ourselves. And so maybe we use our kids as an excuse to get better at this for ourselves, but deciding that technology is a tool, one tool, not the default tool, that we have in our daily lives, and when to use it and when to leave it in the drawer. We use it as a default all the time. It's sort of like background noise in our head now is background. What can we do to put some boundaries around there? And so what I will say is, for families who it's taken over their day, it's easier to start with time-free zone. We're going to have technology-free zones for 2 hours, the hour of dinner, half hour before, half hour out. But you then have to give people something to do with that. It is board game night. It is silent family reading, listening to music night. You can't just take something away, we know this from toddlers, without replacing it with something that's equally or more enticing. And so what does every kid need from their family? Their attention and their time. Their attention and their time. And so we're going to have to figure out what that looks like for us. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to have to decide that it's not okay to answer emails at work at 10 o'clock at night. And you know what? The world's still going to turn tomorrow. And if your job wants you answering emails at 10 o'clock at night, then they also want you to push that envelope to make it 1 in the morning and 3 in the morning. And you've now given away your boundaries. You need to be consistent. We need to be consistent. I'm guilty of this because I've traveled a lot this year. But what I do is, for all those of you who don't know, you can set text return messages and email return messages to a different time Make it send tomorrow at 9:30, not 9 o'clock, because everybody's already overwhelmed. 9:30 or 10 a.m. And if you do that as a leader or as the head of a company or a manager, then your team doesn't expect to have to answer at crazy hours. Let's decide what is reasonable time to interact, unless you're on call and you're an ER doc, which then you've got shift work and you're shifting it the other way. But we have to own boundary setting and give alternative things to do that are positive in the spaces and places that we're choosing to limit our technologies. There was a third question that I lost somewhere.
Well, on the issue that you mentioned here, what happens, I think, in many ways is we put the kids in front of the TV, in front of the devices, in order to create the time to do all the stuff you just mentioned, answer those emails. So it's tied into, all these things sort of tie together in the sense that everyone needs to sort of maybe ratchet it down a little bit so that people recognize the value. The third one was, what about the kids who are ridiculed in school if they don't have the device, the latest device?
Yeah, so we have to default to community norms, right? There's a community in Connecticut that I read about where the mom didn't want to give her kids cell phones early, and they had a community pact where they were all going to get their landlines back. And you know what else happened that is completely invisible to most of us? Now, I'm old enough that we actually had shared party lines when I was a kid. But there is a social interaction that happens when you call up and say, "Hi, Mrs. Smith, this is Sue. Can Judy come out to play?" "Oh, hi, Sue. I heard you had you won a prize for a poem you wrote," and you have this interaction with adults that you are learning stepwise of how to communicate in a human person-to-person kind way that we lose when you text and you can reach the kid directly. And so how do we put all of that learned lessons back into play? And I think that is by setting community norms of what is acceptable, and whether it's through PTAs or your community or your school board setting policy, etc., and then making the default accessible for the 50% of kids who live near or at the poverty level, because we can't continue to make this inaccessible for the many, which is how we got to Chromebooks for everyone. Okay, so then what is the milieu in which use of this Chromebook? Some of those kids don't have anyone who help them or internet connections at home. So maybe those Chromebooks stay at school.
Yeah.
And lots of places are getting rid of homework in order to figure out how do we level the playing field of learning. The other piece of this that's very interesting as you look is emerging technology and AI. Information is going to be at our fingertips at the speed of which we can ask a question. Knowledge and information access is no longer going to be the skill set we need to have experts in every field. It's the critical ability to think and ask an interesting question, right? It's not what the answer is. That's going to be a dime a dozen. It's how to think and what questions to ask. So how do we, kids are curious and ask a million questions, right? Like, how old are your kids?
Mine, one's turning 8 in a couple of weeks, the other's 6.5. And boy, the questions they ask are fascinating.
Absolutely, but they're half or a fraction of what they were when they were 3. How do fish sleep? What do snakes eat? Why is that leaf different than that leaf? Grandma, why is your one eyebrow higher than the other eyebrow? It's like
it's like, oh, nonstop.
So how do we encourage the questioning and the curiosity and the challenging of boundaries as something to embrace? Because it's curious minds who will someday go on to solve huge problems in healthcare and society in every field, instead of asking them to memorize facts. That is not the commodity of the future. The commodity of the future is to be curious and questioning and link interesting things to questions together that only open, innovative minds will have the ability to access.
So a paradigm shift in the whole learning process. I mean,
Yep.
we did it, medical schools started doing that, but we need to bring it down to the elementary school level and then wire their brains to do things in a different way of how to approach problems and to problem solve also, which is also part of it.
But our teachers have to change their framing, including our medical educators.
Yes.
Because the educators are the same people who grade the kids. And so if we have medical students coming to us on rounds and saying, have you thought about this? We can't be saying, that's crazy, that's a zebra. We deal with common things here. We have to be like, wow, let me think about it. We might be onto something. We have to be humble and have the humility enough to know what your son told you. You don't have all the answers. None of us do.
Yeah, exactly. And I will mention one thing about the phones also with the landlines that we used to have. It was always when I was a kid, it was attached to the wall. So that conversation, you couldn't then take the phone into a room, close the door. Everybody sort of knew about that conversation. So if you were going to talk to one of your friends, it wasn't like, it's like, okay, who are you talking to? Everything got filtered. It was a little different back then. You mentioned all of these challenges, but some kids just end up having crises and meltdowns, and we see it. We see they're emotionally overloaded. So how do we help the kids cope and then build that resilience, which will help them move forward? And then how do we get pediatricians also in their role, which is usually focused on the whole child, to help them help these kids as well? I mean, there's two parts to that.
Yeah. So you can't start early enough, right? In building resilience, we have a mindset as people who care about kids to make it all okay for them. Life is not always okay.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we have to sit and be present in their crisis and make sure that we're regulating our own emotions to realize this too shall pass. I can see you're really upset. Let's just sit here and be upset for a little bit.
Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah. That's hard for pediatricians who are fixers. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can do. Here's where you can go. I can refer you. Sometimes with families, we need the time, and the whole payment of healthcare delivery is a topic for a different day that I'd love to tackle with you. But having time in the exam room to sit and just listen to what families are experiencing and be mindfully present in itself is healing, in that they feel like they've been seen, heard, and validated. And that's the first step to healing and to getting better and building resilience. No different with your kid. Your kid wants to know, you're having a hard time. I'm here for you. Yeah. And just sit and be. But you can't be like, but we got to go in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Sometimes they just need you to just sit with them and listen to it and not give them an answer, but just hear them out. It's like my older one went to the store with my younger one, and they each had, I think, $5, and the younger one wanted something, and it was a little more than $5, and the older one gave his money to her so she can get her toy. But then, because he wanted to be nice to his sister, but then later he felt upset and sad because he didn't get anything. So you almost had just listen to him, hear it out, and then explain how that was very generous of him and the positives of that, so that he
and name emotions. Give kids language.
Yes,
I can see are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you sad? There are lots of tools on naming emotions, from toddler books on all the way up. Quite frankly, as adults, we could learn from some of those things, right? Yeah. And then modeling some behavior Mom, what are you doing? Mommy is giving herself a timeout because she's really, really angry. And I'm taking 5 deep breaths, or I'm doing starfish breathing. Would you like to breathe with me? I
Yeah.
can't tell you those kinds of simple tools. Every pediatrician can empower families with in the exam room, in the clinic room, in the hospital. And in fact, I can't tell you how many parents who said, how come someone didn't teach me Foursquare or starfish breathing? If Google them,
Wow.
or we're happy to tell you. But there are so many ways to lower your own emotions through mindfulness training, and you don't need an app. You need your mind, your physical presence, your hand. Use your body, not
Mhm.
technology, to calm yourself. There
Yeah.
are lots of ways. There's now adult coloring books,
Yes, I saw those. Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So if you're having a frustrated day as a parent, say to your kids, mommy's feeling really frustrated and could use some calming. Would you color with me? I mean, how powerful is that?
Yeah. And they're happy to do. They're happy. They're always happy to do that. Help out. They want to help. On another topic, I'm just switching to another obesity, bullying, school performance, mental health. All of these issues overlap. And the other day, David Kressly, the former FDA commissioner and pediatrician who was on one of my podcasts, was talking about these ultra processed foods being they should no longer be considered generally regarded as safe. And he was asking the FDA to change that. So, how should families and schools and everyone, healthcare providers, work to address some of these challenges of obesity? Because I remember, there are these 1950s pictures of kids running around, and they all were thin, really thin, and yet kids are gaining weight now. And how do we address that issue to start with?
Yeah, so let's first acknowledge that obesity is a multifactorial problem that is complex. Now, that doesn't mean we should all throw up our hands and say hand it to the doctors, because it's going to take a societal effort to turn
Mhm.
around. But let's start with what we know about early stress. Young families in stress, when you live constantly in fear because you don't know if you have a safe place to live, you don't know if you have enough food to eat, you don't know you don't know if you can get to school safely in your neighborhood and walk, you can't go outside. Living in that high stress, high adrenaline, high cortisol environment literally changes multiple things about our bodies, including what foods we crave.
Mhm.
When you're upset, what do you crave? Salty, sugary, sweet. If you're a kid who lives and bathes in that adrenaline, cortisol, fight or flight or flee all the time, you are programmed from a young age to crave those foods. Then you go to a place where you don't have enough money to buy healthy foods, and your mom has to decide how to stretch her budget. It is a privilege to walk the periphery of the grocery store with non-processed foods. They are sometimes 4 times as expensive as the frozen ultra processed space. So let's talk about individual changes that your listeners can make, but we need bigger society changes to make this accessible. Remember the shrinking number of kids? If half of them are living in that environment, which we know that 50% of kids are covered by Medicaid or CHIP, and so they are poor enough to live in that stressful zone, it doesn't matter what choices we say they should make, they're not accessible to them. So we need to make sure that we have policy that makes the default healthy foods, that healthy foods are less expensive than ultra processed, high processed foods, that people have enough money to buy the healthy foods, and that neighborhoods have them accessible for all children, regardless of what zip code they're in. So that is the societal promise that we need. If we're going to make America healthier, we need to make a promise to children in every zip code that they can have accessibility to healthy foods and a safer, less stressful, toxic environment to live in. And then we get to those things of all of those choices. So teaching, education is part of that, but we also have to know that many kids don't eat at home, right?
Yes.
We have to make our school choices and lunches. That is the default. We have to figure out in society how the sugary sodas are way more expensive than a bottle of water. We have to make societal changes to make those individual choices easier. We cannot put all of the burden on this, on individual choices and family choices. We should, where we can, applaud and amplify and make that accessible and look at that. But that means a couple of things. I can't tell you, when I was trying to talk to people in my practice about making healthier choices, how many young parents don't know how to cook. For a lot of reasons. They don't have time. They're running home from working a 12-hour day to getting a kid to soccer practice, to getting back to their email, we got to slow down and make time, cook with your kids, put a tomato plant pot in your backyard. Kids love to cook things they grow. There are all kinds of ways to connect all of this back, knowing what we now know about trying to make healthier, non-processed foods available. But we also, people are moved away. I live states away from my young my grandkids, right? How do we figure out, how did they learn how to cook a chicken? So, now they're calling us up. Mom, how do you make a Thanksgiving turkey since you're not coming home? Like, we have to make we've expanded the way we live as communities and generations. We have to make those lessons that we learned baking healthy meals at the table and make that knowledge accessible to everyone. And I think a great way to do it is multi-generation cooking classes. Have kids, parents, and grandparents, where the grandparents are often teaching how to do that. And there were some creative people during COVID who did that online, which was awesome. And all of a sudden people were making bread at home. Remember that? Now the carbs are a part, healthy carbs are a part of a healthy diet. But we also have to understand what it looks like and use the science to guide us to what we know is important and how to eat a colorful plate of well-balanced nutrition, and get off our phones during we're eating, because you'll overeat. You eat past satiety. You eat past satiety, feeling full, when you're not paying attention to what you're eating and how it's nurturing your body.
And with all of this, excuse me, with all this, we're seeing kids, because they're having all these challenges, we're also seeing a lot of kids on a lot of medications, ADHD meds, anxiety, behavioral health issues, because they're challenged. So how do we address that issue? How do we tackle some of those challenges for kids?
Yeah, so I want to tackle the elephant up front from people who are saying we have kids on too much medicine, healthcare is failing kids. No, society is failing kids, and pediatricians are witnessed to failed societal policy. Kids bear the brunt of failed social policy, and pediatricians have a firsthand look. And so we are not putting kids on medicines because it's our default. We try not to medicate kids. We try not to do testing on kids. We think it's mean to make a kid undergo a blood test, a procedure, or put them on medication if we don't have to. But we are forced to, because we are failing in all of the other things as a society that support kids, such as building that early resilience and understanding the difference in the way kids learn and behave in school, and quit trying to necessarily fix them, but do a strength-based approach of what is awesome about me and how do I lift those skills up while I'm trying to, the things that I'm not so good at, try to get better at. And so we are treating what is coming in, but we also, as a healthcare, and now I'm going to get to the payment piece of this, even though I wasn't going to, healthcare doesn't pay for prevention and taking the time to educate and give families what they need. We are paid better for procedures, which is part of the reason that pediatrics is struggling in the whole healthcare payment system, because we're all about wellness promotion, prevention, early detection, and taking time. It is a quick procedure that gets paid. I can get paid 4 times more to take a kid who has nursemaid's elbow when their elbow got pulled out, which takes me literally 15 seconds. I get paid 4 times more to do that than to spend an hour with a depressed suicidal teen. Something is wrong in the payment structure, and this is an opportunity to talk about prevention and health promotion in a way that we really look at. We can't just be a sick care problem, healthcare. We have to talk about wellness and health.
You just touched on my next question, which was, we're seeing adolescents who feel insecure and even suicidal. And I'm sure it's all what we've spoken about as to why this is happening. I'm just curious as to maybe some of your thoughts about that. And what do we do? Because the numbers are scary.
Well, some of the numbers are scary is because we're starting to universally screen, because this was not visible to us before. And so you have to take this in context, because youth today are much more open to talking about mental health issues, including suicidality. And because we are universally asking kids, we are going to get more answers of, yes, I'm struggling. And so the question then becomes, how do we connect them to care? When we have a system that doesn't pay for mental health care, we talk about parity. It is not inexistent. The access is not there. How do we get the kids the help that we need urgently? How do we intervene early and lift them up and connect them to resources? And how do we not silo this so that every grown-up who sees a kid struggling pauses and sees the value of engaging with them and saying, you're struggling, I sense you're struggling, tell me about this, and let's walk through this journey together. Kids struggle more and are more likely to be suicidal if they feel unseen, unheard, undervalued, underappreciated, and invisible, and like they don't matter. The first thing to do is to tell them in unequivocal terms, you are important, you are loved, you are cared about. I am committed to taking this journey with you to get you to a better place and give them hope if they've lost it. And so it's screening, it's connection, and it's everyone owning their part in making sure that every kid feels connected and feels hopeful.
Yeah. And they're heard. They're also heard, right? Because the kids want to know that someone hears their concerns or worries. The other side of that, obviously, is, well, maybe it's all tied together. I've read articles about these helicopter parents where they're even following their kids to college. So it's like we have to build resilience in them, but we also need to make sure that they know there's a safety net there if things start to crumble around them. So I guess it's a balance.
Yeah, it is. It goes back to that early part where you let them, when they're young, make mistakes. They're less big mistakes, and you always tell them, no matter what, you can come to me. I'm here for you. And you have to make that promise early, and we have to make it so that every young family has the ability to do that and has a community around to support them and engage them in making that happen.
Yeah, that does. It takes a lot of people to achieve this. I want to go to an issue which is about the fallout from the pandemic, because it dramatically changed how we trust public health, or how people view public health. And we're seeing measles outbreak. We saw Canada lose its measles elimination status. The United States is on the way to the same situation. So, and a lot of parents are asking to space the vaccines or questioning vaccines. How do we help? How does AAP help support the pediatricians when they're going to have these difficult conversations with parents about vaccines, about autism? What's the next step?
So let's be clear. When we were living through the pandemic, we had no answers. The human mind, when we don't have an answer, tries to find some, right?
Yes.
Right. And you need to make some answers for yourself, because living in uncertainty is incredibly stressful to the human spirit and the human mind. And so as scientists, we know that if we don't have answers, we do the best we can, but we still keep asking questions. And sometimes we find out we were wrong. I mean, my immunology textbook from medical school not only was woefully thin, it's wrong. Science has advanced.
Yeah.
So we've gotten uncomfortable. We've gotten comfortable with science asking questions that lead us to new answers. But that is something that when it has to do with their own health and well-being, the public has a hard time sitting with. So we have to own the fact that it is difficult to live in uncertainty. The problem is now there are people purposely adding uncertainty to what I call settled science, like vaccines. And so when people have uncertainty, they don't trust anything. And then that erodes their own mental ability to deal with uncertainty and make the best informed decisions they can. So what is the Academy doing? A couple of things. First of all, we need to make sure that families know that pediatricians and your pediatric clinician is your trusted resource to take this journey with you. We're not making money because we're an influencer. We do not make money making vaccines. In fact, we often lose significant money. So you're an adult. How many adults listening go to their doctor to get their vaccines? Most people go to a pharmacy. You know why? Because the adult physicians have realized they lose money giving vaccines. Let the pharmaceutical industry figure it out. Pediatricians know we have to protect the kid when they're in front of us because we may never not get another opportunity. So we're willing to take financial significant losses to give vaccines to protect the community of children who we think of the kids in the community as our kids. They're all our kids. We take care of them collectively. So we encourage families to go back to the trusted person should be that person you go to when your kid's having vomiting, diarrhea, or broke their leg or whatever. We are here for all of it, in it for all of it. And we are lifting up our pediatricians with tools to leave space so that families feel seen, heard, and their questions can be asked in a safe place. And then we can give them fact-based information. We are also really working hard to try to put fact-based information in front of families wherever they are, whether it's social media or fact-checked, healthychildren.org, trusted pediatricians with trusted messages based on facts and calling out untruths where they are being promoted as they are, in fact, what we call pre-bunking. When we knew they were going to start talking about hepatitis B vaccine, we started helping people understand this prevents liver cancer from developing from kids who are exposed as infants. Let's talk about what this hepatitis B does. So we are trying to give messages in a respectful place that are fact-based to every family and make it accessible so they have a trusted partner in making the best decision.
So true. On the issue of pediatricians, I want to touch on this. My dad practiced pediatrics for 6 decades or more, I guess. Such passion for caring for kids. And I always recognize that if you ask someone what's their doctor's name, they won't remember their adult doctor's name, but everyone seems to remember their pediatrician's name because of the impact it has on families. And many pediatricians today are really struggling to stay in the profession. What is driving the burnout among pediatricians, and how do we help support the pediatric workforce? And then also, what role will telehealth and AI play in shaping that future for pediatricians in practice?
Okay, so pediatricians are really feeling the brunt of, again, remember I said kids pay the price for failed social policy and pediatricians bear witness firsthand. Yep. Here we are bearing witness once again, under-resourced, underpaid. So first of all, we have to fix the fact that pediatricians are the lowest paid specialty in the House of Medicine. We need more, and it's not because I want to drive a Bentley. I want to hire a care coordinator and a mental health counselor to put in my office to help me lift up kids and have more time to address questions. And so people need to understand, and we need to have serious overhaul of the finance and payment system of healthcare delivery to lift pediatricians up. We also have to, and I've spent a lot of time this year saying, we didn't change. Pediatricians, I wake up in the morning this year and I'm the same person I was 30 years ago when I started practicing medicine. The world around us has changed, which means that we need new tools. And some of those new tools are figuring out how we listen with compassion in a way that families can build trust in us. Some of it is we have to reach families, and your AI telehealth, we can't depend on families coming to us one exam at a time to reach what every family and every community needs. We need to figure out how to use tools of technology and social media and other leverage that we use as easily as we use our stethoscope to be effective communicators in the public space and also become public advocates to be able to do that. I have a lot of hope for technology if tech companies will put pediatricians and child health experts in their advisory committees as they build these tools, because they can be used for good or for harm. Think about the access that we can have to every family in rural communities, in underserved, under-resourced communities. If we can reach them through technology and extend our medical homes and our pediatric expertise to every child and every family and every community, there's power there, but we have to figure out how to not make it all about making money off the finances of seeing the patients, but how to better serve every child, every place. I'm going to take anticipatory guidance and bright futures, which is the core of what we do in pediatric general pediatrics and wellness prevention. We have a lot of things we talk about to every family when they come in. It's getting cold outside. How do you keep your kids safe in a car seat? Don't put their snowsuit underneath the belts. They slide out of them, right? So we can do this one kid at a time in our exam room. Or how about we used AI technology to use Sue Kressly's voice and make an avatar that sounds like me, that reaches every patient and family that I'm in charge of in their preferred language, and push messaging to them there. They see it at their daycare drop-off. They see it in the bus. They see it in the subway. How are we giving health promotion, wellness, safety, all of that to every child in every community in a way that leverages what we know we can use technology to meet the needs of a nation's children?
Great points here. Two last questions before we turn to our audience. One is, since we're pediatricians, I guess we are allowed to live in the world of fantasy for our patients. So I wondered, if you had a magic wand, what two things would you want changed at the federal, the state, or local level in government to improve the lives of children and to make it better for both pediatricians and, most importantly, for as I mentioned, the kids' lives and their parents?
The first one is that on every policymaker and elected official's mind is the first question of every problem is, what about the kids? Yeah. It's an afterthought in every policy, in every technology division. And if they understand that 22% of the population is 100% of the future, how do we start with those kids? Because if we build it for kids, everybody will win. That's number one. And the second is, how do we leverage lifting up some social basic needs? We're often compared to other developed nations, and why we're failing in healthcare. It's because we consider things healthcare that other countries think a social contract. Everybody should have a safe place to live, enough food to eat, clean drinking water that's not exposed to environmental toxins. That's a place where they start. So let's raise the threshold so that everyone from senior citizens to pregnant women can benefit from a societal commitment to keep each other healthy and see each other as valuable contributors to the society.
I like that. I like that. And my last question before we go to the audience is, what are 3 takeaways for parents and for caregivers about what they can do to meaningfully improve their children's lives?
Put down your phone,
Yeah.
be mindfully present, and listen and value your kids' conversations at all stages of their development.
Excellent, excellent. And I will take that to heart with my 2 little kids as well. So I could go on for another hour of questions, but I do want to turn to our subscribers. There's so many important things you've touched upon. It just, I was going to ask you a little bit about the fact that a lot of pediatricians are involved in public policies, and I've had on the podcast 8 pediatricians so far, which says something about our focus on issues. But it's time to tee up the questions for our audience. This is when they have a chance to ask you some questions. I know we're tight on time, so we may only be able to take a few. I always mention that the information we share is just for information, but if you have a specific question about you or your child, talk to your pediatrician, your doctor, because they know your medical history. So, Kat, let's bring up the questions that we have. And
absolutely. So I'm going to ask the first question because I always do.
Great.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Kressly. This has been fantastic. I don't even have kids, and I'm like thinking of all of the ways that I need to implement this for future children that exist. So I really appreciate your time. This question came in, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can lean the question more towards a little more towards mental health and sort of like substance prevention in teens and adolescents. But how can schools and pediatricians and families all collaborate together to sort of try and prevent that? I read somewhere that the highest death rate, or like the highest cause of death for teens, is firearms. And so I'm wondering, they always try to connect that with mental health and with possible potential substance abuse for whatever reason. So I'm also curious about how you might figure out that we should all be collaborating together, because it is a community effort, as we've talked about a lot.
Yeah, we need to stop making this about personal choice and personal failure and personal responsibility, and start talking about this as a public health good. If every child is thriving in your community, everyone in the community wins. And so it should be a collective responsibility about how do we help build resilience at all stages, identify concerns early, connect people to resources that are healthy, and help them understand that struggling is a part of life. We need to give you some healthy tools to be able to feel like you can manage them. Not look for escapism, quick fixes, etc. And we can also model that behavior by talking about it. Is, teachers saying, I was overwhelmed last night when I got home from school. I decided to take a walk. What do the rest of you people do? Let's have conversations and quit the silos. You said it, collaboration. Schools, communities, the health organizations. We got to keep saying that's in the health sector, that's in the education sector, that's in the public policy sector. No, it is our collective responsibility to raise up and care for every child in our community. So there's plenty of opportunity, and let's ask curious questions and come up with great innovative solutions.
excellent.
Thank you very much. That was great. The only other question that I saw come in, and this is from, I don't know who doesn't want to be on camera, but the question is, what environmental health risks should parents be monitoring? I think you touched on this a little bit, but I don't know if you might want to expand.
Yeah, so I think we need to pressure our officials who initially were talking about environmental risks, and now we're really undoing some of the harms. For example, there are still many places in this country where kids are getting lead poisoned through their water and housing supply. We've stopped collecting data because some of this was underfunded. That is unacceptable. And so we need to, when we talk about environmental things that we know, we need to be able to really have policies around them to make sure that we're eliminating environmental toxins. Forever chemicals and plastics are huge. And what I learned recently is, though we're testing for some of them, and I can't say all of the letters eloquently, What the chemical industry often does is change a molecule here and there from a chemistry standpoint, and then we're not testing for that because it's different. And so we need to really push our public policy and environmental people to look at what we know about pesticides and forever chemicals and plastics and come up with a comprehensive policy. In the meantime, families are going, oh God, what should I do? Get rid of your plastic storage containers for food and get to glass and wash them. Or make only enough food that you don't have leftovers, and then you don't overeat and you don't do that. But there are things that you can take in your daily life to decrease your exposure and your kids' exposure. And the first part is education and learning, and then pushing our policymakers to take this on in a real way, because it's not popular among the industries who depend on them.
We had Phil Landrigan on several months ago to talk about some of these environmental toxins and these issues. You know, when I listen to all that you're saying, it sounds to me that society needs to have a reset button on all of this, because yeah, you could just cook a meal that's just for that day, but it goes back to the issues you were saying before. But everyone's rushing and everything's moving so fast, and so it's sort of like, just take a step back and try to use the technologies that are good to help improve your life, but don't use it to sort of just speed things up so that we can get more and more done. That's not necessarily healthy. That's part of the challenge, I think.
Except I don't think we get a reset, because technology will always double and triple and go forward. The answer is the kids have the answers. I look to the kids and say, if you could, what do you think your world wants to look like? Let's listen more effectively to them. They are tapping out. They are pulling away from their cell phone usage. They are turning things off because they crave human interaction. Yes. And they have the answers. So let's start listening to the kids.
I mean, one of the most common things my kids say is play with me. That's one of the play with me. So, and then if I'm near the phone, it's sort of, you're looking at your phone, play with me. So just, you know, it comes in because they're honest. Kids are very honest.
And we could benefit from playing too.
Yeah. Yes, we sure can, which is very healthy for everyone. Kat, do we have any other questions, or we're at the top of the hour?
We are at the top of the hour.
Okay. All right, great. Well, Dr. Kressly, your insight today has been absolutely incredibly valuable. I mean, you covered so many issues that, and there's so many more, but so many issues that are not just for parents and pediatricians, but really for anyone who cares for children or cares about children. And hopefully that is everyone. All right? Everyone in society should be concerned. But as pediatricians, we understand how the early years really do shape a child's health, as you were talking about, their resilience and their future. And I was saying all along that I see this with my own kids, and it's a reminder of why this work matters so deeply and why what pediatricians do is so valuable to the future of the world, for that matter. You've helped us explore numerous important issues, and as your presidency for the AAP term comes to an end in 2026, early 2026, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of your leadership and unwavering commitment to children's health, particularly in a very tough year. And we didn't even touch upon the government issues and all the other things that are out there, because there was so much that I thought was important to talk about for parents and for those who care for kids. But thank you for so much for being with us today. And that's our show for today. Remember, if you are a Docology subscriber, you can join the conversation. You just have to sign up for email reminders about upcoming episodes at docology.life or on Substack. And you can always listen to us on Apple or Spotify. And so tune in next time, because the topic we cover may just save your life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Docology is a production of Hang Media. Our producer is Catherine Warren. Ronnie Selig is editorial advisor. Our creative director is Anna Richard. Janine Wilson of Wilson Media Group handles paid marketing. Our publicists are Leslie Ann Wade and Jerry Caracoli. Theme music was composed by Nick Kitts. Subscribe and join our community at docology.life. Until next time, move, wash your hands, and stay healthy.